Well, hey, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Conversations. This week, I want to talk to you about why your team is failing. I think this applies to anybody who leads a team. You might lead a team at your church, you might lead a specific team at your workplace, or you might be starting a startup. It might be applicable to your family. I think we're all leading somebody. But really, this concept comes to this core idea. Most leaders don't fail because they don't care. They fail because they assume things are healthy when they're not. We have to be able to define what health is and what health is not, because your team isn't falling apart overnight. That's the reality. It's dying slowly from things you're ignoring daily. If you've ever wondered why people aren't following your vision, why there's drama, or why momentum keeps breaking, this episode is going to be for you. We're just going to dive in and talk about some actual real reasons teams fail. And obviously, I want to give you some solutions and what to do about it. 8 reasons your team is failing or has already failed. And I just want to make sure you understand this concept of failing doesn't mean you're a failure. I think that is a lot of nuance to it. And a lot of times when we're insecure, we apply our season to our identity, and I'm just pleading with you to not do so. Just because your team is failing does not mean you are a failure. That just means you failed. You lost, and that's okay. We got to have winners and we got to have losers. Oftentimes, the best ideas, the best innovative core principles in our life come from failures, and this is an opportunity for you to grow and for you to learn. So 8 reasons your team is failing and how to fix it. Number 1, you confuse clarity with communication. Here's just a few thoughts about this. So, saying something once doesn't mean people heard it. There is a difference between talking and communication. Just because you're talking, just because you're saying something doesn't mean people actually hear you. Just because they're listening doesn't mean they hear you. And oftentimes what we do is we just assume because we communicate, there's clarity. Something that I really love to do is just ask. You're not a bad leader asking, does that make sense? What can I do to bring more clarity? The more important something is, the more often you should repeat it. And yes, sometimes you get sick of saying the same old thing. That is your opportunity to say the same thing in a different way. This is a classic example. We preach Jesus 52 weeks a year, and maybe you have 2 to 3 services, so you're preaching Jesus over 100 times. That's the core principle of the church, is Jesus. Not every single message is the same, but at the end of the day, the core principle, the core thesis comes around this core idea of Jesus. You might be saying the same thing 1,000 times, but you got to learn how to say it in different angles, in different ways for a different specific group of people so that they can understand it. This is a context example for me. I talk to directors, I talk to leaders, I talk to a whole team, I talk to people in the business world, I talk to influencers. I got to know what group of people I'm communicating to because they all listen and receive differently. Guests who don't know Jesus hear things differently than somebody who's been saved for 50 years. And where you come in is you got to understand who you're called to talk to. You got to understand who God's called you to reach and who is your audience. And if you can learn your audience, you can learn how they hear things. Because great leaders over-communicate vision until it becomes part of the culture. The classic example I've shared on this before is if your team can't verbatim say your values, explain your culture in a sentence, they don't understand it yet. And if they can't finish your sentence, you haven't said it enough. So number 1, you confuse clarity with communication. Number 2, you've stopped developing your leaders. You can't expect your team to grow if you're not growing them. We know this. Everything rises and falls in leadership. So this is a unique opportunity for you to do some introspective work. Have I given up subconsciously, potentially, on the people that I'm leading? And yes, I understand familiarity is a real thing, that you do something with somebody for so long that it's almost like an innate relationship. But here's a problem with that. If I stop taking my wife on dates, just because we've been married for almost 5 years, doesn't mean that we're just going to naturally be healthy. You're either growing or you're dying in leadership. There is no plateauing. And I would say you are either growing or dying in your relationships. There's no plateauing. There really isn't. Leadership development is not an event. It's really a lifestyle, but it's also a rhythm. Have a rhythm attached to your relationships. It's not bad. Every Thursday night, we get to have a date night, my wife and I. Why? Because it's important to us. Just have a cadence and a rhythm to the people that you love and the people that you're trying to develop, because it will not happen by default. You have to have intentionality around your relationships, and that is your problem to solve. That is not the people who follow you for them to just chase you down. That is a core principle or reoccurring theme I've heard from leaders. And it's just so funny to me that they think that they're that important that people have to chase them down. And that's just not true. Jesus chose his disciples. His disciples did not choose Jesus. He chose them, he called them, and he activated them, and he did life with them. He grew them. And that, to me, is you and I's definition of development. It's not by default, it's by design. My last thought on that one is, if your best people aren't being stretched, they'll start looking elsewhere. I remember there was a core moment in my life where I had a leader sit me down at a lunch and said, "Hey, do you feel like you're hitting your ceiling in our organization?" And transparently, I said yes. And I knew in that moment what he was doing was he was going to have a conversation with my direct report, because no one in your organization, your team, your church should ever feel like they're hitting a ceiling or they're hitting a lid. What that tells me is your world isn't big enough. Your worldview, your perspective is not big enough for people. And honestly, big people need big vision and big ceilings, because they will master something quickly, they will dominate, and they will find other people, and it's your job to create space for them. And that is the true testament of leadership. So number 3, you hire for help instead of help. Filling positions fast are not the same as finding the right person. This is something that I heard from the book Good to Great, and it's really this concept of the bus. The bus is the primary mission that you are trying to activate, whether you are a church, whether you're a business, it does not matter. Filling the bus is not as important as getting the right people on the bus. Once you have the right people on the bus, you can find the right seats. What we do when we have a fear attached to our outcomes of what we're building, we fill the bus with randoms who say yes, and we put them in places of authority because they say yes. And that is fine if you want to build a micro team. If you are a very, very new leader, I would say that's usually what I would see in youth ministry or very, very, very small entrepreneurs or startups that have a very low ARR, is usually the people just want to have people on the bus. They don't have a good quality or qualitative function or system behind who they're hiring. You don't want to hire fast. You don't want to put people in positions fast. You want to find the right person, journey with them. Ask yourself, just because they understand their gift set, does that mean they understand our culture? Because I would rather have somebody who's less gifted but understands our culture more than the opposite. Because a wrong fit with talent will still create tension. And that's the principle that a lot of times in my experience, churches do not do well. They try to fit somebody in who's just talented or gifted, but they don't fit in. They do not speak your language. There might be core philosophy differences that aren't bad, but there is a difference, and we have to get people aligned. And I'm not saying only have people around you who think like you. That's also unhealthy. But what I'm asking you to do and I'm submitting you to do is, when you're hiring, don't hire for help, hire for health. And oftentimes I would recommend hiring your weaknesses, not your strengths, because your strengths are your strengths, and you want to double down on that for sure. But you got to hire your weaknesses, and you got to hire people at probably a higher pay grade than you are willing to do, to ensure that you are not just hiring helpers, you're hiring leaders who are healthy. And also, last thought on this hiring concept, stop hiring to fix pressure. Hire to people who can't correct and reproduce culture are not supposed to be on the bus as far as leadership. Because there's a difference, again, between doing tasks and building culture. Building culture will sustain you, and that's how longevity is actually there. Because if you have a healthy culture, you have a healthy environment, you have a healthy ecosystem, what you'll have is you'll have a place of growth and sustainability and longevity. If you don't, you have pressure. And you and I both know what happens when a valve gets clogged with pressure. It explodes. And oftentimes, people who hire to fix pressure cause explosions. And you don't want explosions in your organization. Number 4, you're confusing friendship for followership. Being liked doesn't make you an effective leader. You can be friendly without forfeiting your authority. This is the big core idea on this one. When leaders need approval more than alignment, the team suffers. I'm not working for approval. I don't need your approval. I don't need you to be bought into me. I don't need you to like me. What I do need you to do is I need you to be aligned with the mission, vision, values, and culture. If I can get you aligned on those 4 things and you are embodying those things, I know our team will thrive. But if I'm just trying to be your friend, it's not going to work. I have friends. I have relationships. And not to say that we won't be friends or we won't be friendly, but I have heard it in my life shared as hats, that you have different hats, you have different buckets that you wear. I have a pastor hat, I have a CEO hat, I have a employee hat, I have a husband hat, I have a dad hat, I have a friend hat. It's my job to know what hat I'm wearing in what room. It is not my job and my responsibility to get people to understand which hat I'm wearing. And there's times where I'm actually somebody's pastor, I'm somebody's leader, and there's times where my friend hat is on. We're talking about fantasy football, we're laughing, we're joking, we're getting dinner, we're hanging out. And then there's times where my pastor hat's on. And I'm not their friend, I'm their pastor. And it's not my job for you to know which part of me am I allocating. There is no difference. Josh is the same in every room, but there is nuance to our authority in the way that I'm talking to you. You're confusing friendship with followership. Just because you have friends doesn't mean they actually are influenced by you and follow you. The classic example is just because an influencer has followers doesn't mean they have influence. And I would say the same. Just because you have friends doesn't mean you have followers. And just because you have followers doesn't mean you have influence. Number 5, you're managing tasks instead of leading people. Teams don't follow checklists. They follow clarity and conviction. What you don't have clarity and conviction around is oftentimes the biggest hindrance to your mission every day of the week. And if you are oftentimes Enneagram 3 high achiever who loves checklists, who loves just getting things done, this is going to be really challenging for you because tasks are not usually attached to clarity and to conviction. They are outlets and they are lanes to get there, but they're not there. And what I would love everyone that I know to do, including everyone listening to this, you got to adopt this principle: freedom within a framework. This is an example. I don't care how many coffees you get a month with people. I don't. In the context of leadership in an organization, I don't care how many one-on-ones you have with your staff. What I do care about is results and outcomes. If you need to have 10 one-on-ones a week, amazing, do that. If you don't need them at all and you communicate on Slack or voice memo, do that. If I have to micromanage how you lead people, you are in the wrong seat. And if you're more focused on what they do than who they are, you will lose their heart. You just lose the heart in it because you truly are using them as a machine. And one thing about AI and machines is they don't have the heart. They don't have the spirit. And that is the indicator of the difference between humans and machines. An AI can do emails, an AI can do a service flow, an AI can even write messages, but it's not a sermon because there's no spirit attached to it. And that is the difference between humanity and systems and machines, is you got to focus on the heart and you got to focus on who they are, not what they do, because leadership is not about control, it's about connection. And it's going to be a really long journey for you if you can't figure out how to be a person who connects with people. Number 6, you don't confront what's killing culture. What you don't confront, you confirm every day of the week. What you don't challenge, what you don't correct, you confirm, and you're actually putting your stamp of approval behind it. As micro and macros, you want to make that exaggerated as much as you need. It's the same principle. Toxic behavior tolerated once becomes normalized fast. It does every single time. If you see toxicity and you don't speak to it, you're not a leader. You aren't, because you don't know how to shape and correct culture. If you don't know how to shape and correct culture, you're not a leader. Great leaders protect culture even if it means hard conversations. I just had a conversation with a leader that I lead, and they're having one of their first confrontations. They're having a conversation with somebody being offboarded of one of their teams. And I was smiling the whole conversation because I'm like, welcome to leadership. Welcome to the journey, bro. Because that's what we got to do. We got to have hard conversations. And that's how you earn people's respect. Number 7, you've made vision complicated. If your team can't repeat your vision in one sentence, it's too complex. This is the core principle in this one, and we can move on. Simplicity builds unity. Just keep it simple. My favorite college football team is Iowa. They're the most boring team to watch. Why? They are so simple. And yet, we have at minimum 9 wins a season. I'm not saying we're winning championships, but there is a level of simplicity to our playbooks. And our coaches understand that simple plays get yardage. And not every play is a touchdown, but every play oftentimes leads to a first down. So simplicity builds unity because people don't follow big words, they follow clear direction. Big vision isn't cute. Anybody can have a big vision. Big vision's easy. You know how many people in the late 90s talked about technology? Do you know how many incredible iPhones there are that never exist? Because why? They had big vision. They had no direction. And the difference between Steve Jobs and every other person who tried to copy him is he had clear direction. Number 8, you've forgotten that leadership is stewardship. Your title doesn't matter. It doesn't make you the owner. It makes you the caretaker. Every role, every person, every opportunity is just a trust. And it's you. You are the common denominator of all of your relationships, all the people you lead, all of your dreams, all your ambitions. You are the common denominator. And when you stop thanking God for the platform he gave you, you start taking credit for it. And you want to know what happens when you take credit for the thing that God put in your heart? It crumbles because you are not the primary person who's given you that. And God has given you something to trust and to build. And more than a vision, he's given you people to trust and to build. Leadership is stewardship. That is what it is. You have to be a good steward of everything he's given you. And if you steward what's in your hand, he will give you what's in your heart. So just to close up here, teams don't fail because of one mistake. They fail because of small neglect. You cannot lead what you're not willing to look at honestly. And my hope is in this podcast of those 8 notes, 8 thoughts around this principle of failing teams, you will see you're winning in a lot of areas, and there's usually one dark spot, one dark corner that we got to bring light to. And if you want your team to win again, start asking hard questions. Where have I stopped leading? Where have I stopped learning? Where have I stopped listening? And if you can answer one of those 3 questions or all 3 of those in a very honest place, the health of your team will always reflect the honesty of you. You're the leader. And if you can't be honest, your team will never flourish. So lead with courage, clarity, and conviction, and watch what God can rebuild through you. I want to read these points one more time. You confuse clarity with communication. You've stopped developing your leaders. You hire for help instead of health. You've confused friendship for followership. You're managing tasks instead of leading people. You don't confront what's killing culture. You've made vision complicated, and you've forgotten that leadership is stewardship. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. We'll see you next week.